Sometime around sixth grade, if I remember that correctly, I had this teacher that was a history teacher, and he always talked with his hands a lot. Every time he would talk about something, he was waving and moving his hands all over the place. And in the class, he was extremely into the topics that he was talking about. He was very much into the history of it. Now, the teacher is teaching the same things every semester, and you would think that he would have gotten bored of this by now, but he was always heavily engaged in it and always interested in anything about history. And a lot of the other students and everybody sort of made fun of him about this. And whenever we had something that was a topic that he was really into, he would always start moving his hands around and making all these gestures. And in that class, they talked about things in history such as ancient Egypt, and we talked about Greece, ancient Greece, a little bit about Rome. And the best part was always the days that we got to watch movies. And there were so many of these movies that we had to watch that no one really had any interest in. I had interest in them. I was always interested in learning about history and learning about the different ancient societies and cultures that used to exist in the day. But a lot of the students they got really bored of it. They had no interest. They were more interested in just socializing with everyone else, or they were just looking forward to lunch or just getting off of school. But it was one of the few classes I actually had interest in. Um, I had interest in history and in science classes. And of course, my favorite class was gym. And this class that we had, the teacher that always talked with their hands, um, just across from the class, outside the window, there was this large grass area. It was sort of like a big grass field, but it was the area across from the class, and there was these big wide windows. The windows were about maybe only 2 feet off the ground, and they went up all the way to like 7.5 feet near the top of the ceiling. And these ran the whole length of the classroom, and that was like maybe 16 feet. And out the window, you could see the area where we would have a gym class. And most of the time, our gym class would be outside because it was warm most of the year where I lived. And when I was in the class, um, whenever the teacher was talking with his hands and everything, some of the students were just zoned out, looking out the window, just waiting, looking forward to gym class or looking forward to when they get to go home. I'm trying to remember what time of the day it was I had this class. Um, I'm thinking that I had his class twice. I never failed the class, so I'm trying to remember why it was I had his class twice. Um, Maybe it taught a more advanced class or something, but I remember just sitting there in class, and I would look out sometimes too, and I would see that clear blue sky, and I could see the area off in the distance where it was this outdoor basketball court, a baseball field, a track, and this track there wasn't really any stadium that I remember. It was around it. It was just an outside, um, sports activity area. So there was a baseball field, a track, a basketball court outdoors, and a couple of other things that was around there. And when I was sitting in that class, I think that my class that I had that was outdoor gym class during one of the semesters was right after this, and so as soon as the bell rang, I would just go out the door and start running down the sidewalk area there, go into my gym class because I was excited to, um, get moving around. I got tired of sitting for most of the day. Um, but the teacher, whenever the other students were zoned out looking out the window and stuff, he would get so angry. He was a very calm person, and he never yelled or anything. But um, when he got really angry, he would talk with his hands a lot as well. And it was this very different personality from how he was when he was just teaching compared to when he was frustrated with the other students when he was trying to teach class, and especially when he was trying to teach a subject that he was really into. He would just continue talking even while other students were interrupting him or bothering him, and then he would just stop, and he'd always give this very angry look to the student, whoever was interrupting. It was so funny to see that to me, his reaction. And he was always very into these things he was teaching us. And every time he taught it, he acted as if, this was the first time that he's ever even taught this subject. And that it's the first time he's ever, seen any of this material content. And these were movies, that it was like documentaries and stuff that he's seen hundreds of times, taught so many times. And um, during the movie, another funny thing he would do is he would pause the movie sometimes, and then he would go into detail about it and start moving his hands around and talking and everything. And he, at the time, this was quite a while ago. He he was much older at the time. I think he had to have been around 70 years old at the time. Um, but I don't think I've seen him since I had those classes. That was many, many years ago. And um, whenever we were watching movies, as I said, that he would pause the movie, he started talking with his hands, and he would get into the subject even more. And then I remember a time we were watching the movie, and he was talking with his hands, after he paused the movie, and some student was interrupting him, and he just gave this funny, angry look. And but I think that was around sixth grade when I had that class. It was an interesting class about different ancient cultures and stuff. I enjoyed it, and um, there's there's so many things that happened from when I was in school that a lot of it I seem to completely just forget, and I don't remember it until some completely random time, like later on the day, or maybe a couple years from now I'll remember something. But um, yeah, it was an interesting time. It was a fun class. Although some of the other students didn't find it enjoyable, they probably thought it was bored because they didn't care about learning about history or any of that stuff. And I remember too in that class that some of the other students they'd always arm wrestle each other and stuff like that. And we had um, it was something, the other students were all made up. It was like school arm wrestling championships in this class or whatever. Who's the best arm wrestler? Um, and I remember this one kid. He was pretty tall. He was a lot bigger than everybody, and it was me and him, and there was this other kid that he was really short, but he was very muscular, and uh, it was the three of us that ended up always arm wrestling each other. Um, and the other two, they always kind of ended up at a stalemate. They couldn't beat each other, um, and they were kind of even. And at the time, I wasn't. muscular or anything like I am now, but I always had very good arm strength and just overall strength, and so I was able to beat them. And uh, the other classes I had, we arm wrestled and everything too, but this was a class that I had a couple of people that was also my gym class. So whenever this class was over, we'd arm wrestle and do whatever, and um, right after that we'd have gym class. And so then there's a couple of guys that always want to like race me to where the outdoor sports area was with the basketball court and baseball field and everything. And a lot of us would always like race from the lockers once we got to the lockers. So the bell would go off for us to change classes. We would go from our social studies or history class. Then we had a couple minutes to get to our next class. And then so we would get to the locker room area for our gym class, and get ready. And then whenever we're ready, the uh, gym class teacher or coach would be standing like outside the area. We'd have to be out there at a certain time, and then once everybody's ready, uh, the gym teacher or coach, he's like, "All right, meet me out the field." Everybody just started sprinting out there as fast as they could, and I think the distance, if I remember this correctly, from the lockers to that area, where the sports complex area was, um, I think it had to have been at least 400 meters. Um, yeah, at least 400 meters, maybe 600. I'm not quite sure because it was quite a distance away. It was on the other side of the whole the whole school, and then you had to walk a little ways to get to it still. So it was between 400 to 600 meters, at least around there. And so we would all just start sprinting there as fast as we could. And yeah, that was a fun class too. But that'll be a story for a completely different time. But that class was always after my history or social studies class with a teacher that would always talk with his hands and was really into history.